Welcome to the Afghanistan Project Podcast, where we delve into some of the most pressing concerns facing the people of Afghanistan, highlight the individuals from around the world and across the political spectrum who've stepped up to render support to our Afghan allies, and raise the voices of the many people who've been endangered by the Taliban's oppressive rule. I'm Beth Bailey, here with my co-host Mikael, and today we're thrilled to host 3 members of the Legend Group Foundation, which has been doing incredible work to maintain interest in the ongoing struggles Afghans are facing. Legend is the founder of Legend Group Foundation and Vets4NRF. As an Afghan-American, Legend joined the U.S. Army to give back to the country that took him in when his family fled to the U.S. just days before September 11, 2001. Legend deployed multiple times to Afghanistan during his Army service and has returned to Afghanistan on several occasions since the U.S. withdrawal to rescue American citizens, Christians, and other at-risk individuals who were left behind. Jazz Cannon is the spokesperson for Legend, as well as the senior advisor for Legend Group Foundation and Vets4NRF. Having also fled Afghanistan with her family to avoid Taliban persecution, she's motivated to help those who remain in the country under Taliban persecution, under today's Taliban. Jazz personally returned to Afghanistan in August of 2022 to witness the Taliban's rule firsthand. Richard Barrett is a historian and author whose books cover a gamut of topics related to counterinsurgency and the historical conduct of war. Richard has previously helped refugees from the Middle East and Africa acclimate to life in the U.S., and he's passionate about using his wealth of knowledge and expertise to help the Afghan cause. Thank you all for joining us today to talk about all this important work that you're spearheading.
Thank you for having us. Good evening.
Well, Legend, I'd love to start by asking you about Vets4NRF. When did you start the group, and what made you decide that the National Resistance Front presents the greatest possibility for peace in Afghanistan?
Well, first I would like to thank both of you, Beth, Mikael, for having us here. Vets4NRF officially launched on January 1st of this year, but unofficially, when I was in Afghanistan back in September 2021, right after the last U.S. soldier had left the country, I realized the need for such an organization. We saw tremendous support in the veteran community for those members of the Afghan armed forces who would rather stay back and fight and resist. And I remember I was getting calls from U.S. SEALs. These are retired Special Forces, Navy SEALs, infantrymen, Marines, and some of them were ready to return to Afghanistan on their own to fight and support the resistance. And I was telling them, I remember telling a few of them that there is no need, that the Afghan resistance has the numbers, they have the training, and that at this point all they need is advice and a voice in America, and this is something they could help with. And to your second question, why the NRF presents the greatest possibility for peace? Well, again, in 2021, you all know when the so-called leaders of the former government fled, it was Commander Massoud, a man who had not been in the previous government and had no role in the corruption that was going on, was chosen by his constituency to save Afghanistan, and he agreed and declared a national resistance front, and he was successful in uniting the Afghan commandos and the political figures, and since then he has successfully led several conferences on Afghan peace talks in both Europe and also in Asia. And together they issued a joint proclamation declaring his wishes and the wishes of the Afghan people and the NRF for peace and equality for all Afghans. Commander Massoud even held peace talks with the Taliban, with our enemy. But the enemy rejected peace, leaving us with no alternative but to resist by the means of armed struggle. And so a year and a half, close to 2 years from that point, we have reached a point now where now we proclaim liberty by any means necessary, freedom by any means necessary. And so the NRF, under the leadership of Commander Massoud, is the last democratic forces resisting for all of Afghanistan against 27 violent extremist groups. Groups like ISIS and Al-Qaeda, who according to the CENTCOM general, testifying last week at the U.S. Senate, claimed that these groups were able to carry out an attack against the West in under 6 months. And so, given all these facts, knowing all of these facts, we American veterans know that Kabul is not Las Vegas, that what happens in Afghanistan does not stay in Afghanistan, and as such, our support for the NRF that's fighting our common enemy makes America safer. And that's why we created the organization Vets4NRF, to encourage the elected officials of the United States to honor our commitment to the Afghan people by enacting specific policies and making sure Afghanistan remains free, the resistance succeeds, and Afghanistan remains an ally of the United States.
That's really incredible. What is the state? We used to see in the media somewhat frequently what the state of affairs was in Panjshir, where most of the fighting at least used to be happening up in northern Afghanistan. Is that still ongoing? Where is that fighting? Is it localized to Panjshir, or has it moved outside of there? Like, what's going on with the NRF and the Taliban right now?
Good question. Well, the Taliban and their allies have surrounded the NRF on all sides. And this is ISIS, Al-Qaeda, and all of their allies. They have the numbers. They're better equipped. They are advised by foreign intelligence and the special operations groups of our neighboring countries. And we know and we have evidence that when attacking the NRF positions, the Taliban are supported by ISIS and other foreign terrorist networks. And we know that they have an unlimited supplies of weapons and reinforcement and gear that was left behind during the withdrawal. Yet, despite all of this, the NRF has continued winning and expanding. And something your audience may not know is that in Afghanistan, there's a fighting season, and that there is no fighting during the winter season. Well, the NRF has only had one fighting season, and that was in 2022. And in such a short time frame, without any foreign support, relying only on the generosity of the Afghan people, Commander Massoud and his generals, General Khalid Amiri and others, have expanded the operations from, as you mentioned, in Panjshir, in one sub-valley of Panjshir, to now operating in over a dozen different provinces. This is something that no one else was able to achieve in the past 2 decades. And we owe our successes not only to the bravery of the Afghan forces who stayed back and are resisting, but their commanders, and especially our leader, and his strategy of outsmarting the enemy. I mean, the whole world saw over this past year and a half that Commander Massoud is moving the enemy, and he's not moved by them.
That's really incredible. I've seen, so there are a lot of former Afghan military personnel who are working with Massoud and the NRF. I've heard stories, and I don't know if you've heard this, of people who are waiting for SIVs, have sometimes wanted to join, and yet there's a problem with, if they do join the NRF, then they are not going to be able to get an SIV or get their P1, P2 referral. Have you heard anything about that on your side?
You said these are SIVs, you mean like interpreters, or?
Just anybody with an SIV application underway. I've heard that if you are trying to get a visa to the U.S., that participation in the NRF is an impediment to your ability to come here, which to me seems, if it's true, seems entirely unfair. If you're fighting for the country that you were fighting for before. And so I wondered if you had heard that at all as you're working with Vets4NRF.
I've not heard anything like that, but
Okay.
I would say this, that the NRF respects the wishes of the Afghan people. I mean, if an Afghan soldier wants to resist, they're more than welcome to, and Commander Massoud has openly said he welcomes everyone and will provide the means for them to resist. But at the same time, if an Afghan soldier, a former soldier, wants to rest and not fight, we thank them for their service, and will help them with if they need to evacuate or move to a safer country, to a different place, would definitely help them.
Hey, Legend, what does the NRF, in your opinion, what does the NRF need to win, and what does winning look like? Like, what's the end goal?
Well, the NRF is, as far as two parts to your question, what they need, Commander Massoud has openly said that we would be lying to the world if we suddenly said we do not need any support. We do need support. And from my personal opinion, serving under the former CENTCOM Commander General Joseph Votel, I would say a CENTCOM liaison is absolutely necessary to the NRF that could support and provide, at the present moment, non-lethal support. Intelligence would be great to have on the ground, something that we hope that in the coming days the U.S. Congress and this administration would provide. Knowing that just recently the CENTCOM commander, in his testimony to the U.S. Senate, said that these violent extremist groups operating out of Afghanistan are able to strike the West in under 6 months.
That's terrifying to think about. I want to ask about something that when we talked to Leslie Merriman several episodes ago, she had talked about the slow-moving genocide that's going on in Afghanistan right now, and it's generally against the Tajik population. And most of the reporting that I've seen, the Taliban conflate being Tajik with being a member of the NRF. Are you seeing that? Are you seeing that now, still ongoing in the areas where the NRF is operating, that the Taliban are going after all of the Tajik people around there? And do you think, is there a tie with, is the NRF still largely a Tajik organization, or has it expanded to, I guess that's a two-part question, but to include other ethnicities to make it a more diverse movement?
Well, sure, you all know that the Taliban are committing a genocide, and but the truth is, it's not only against the Tajiks, it's against everyone in Afghanistan. This is a barbaric group, a crime syndicate, a group of opium traders and poppy growers led by sanctioned and wanted terrorists, men like Sirajuddin Haqqani, who's second in command in Afghanistan and has a $10 million bounty on his head and is wanted by the FBI. And men like Aji Bashir, the Pablo Escobar of Afghanistan, and men like Nur Ahmad Agha, who runs the Afghan Central Bank, but was sanctioned for financing IED attacks that killed hundreds of American soldiers, and other terrorist leaders who have openly made statements such as their job and their reason for existence is to do jihad and to spread jihad, not to feed people or provide security. And these people are committing genocide, and they're targeting not only the Tajiks, but they're killing just as many Pashtuns, Hazaras, Uzbek, Turkmen. And so no group is really safe from the Taliban and their allies. And you're right. When the Taliban captures, let's say, the resistance fighters, they execute them on spot. They do not follow any sort of international rules of war or the Islamic rules of war. On the other hand, when we capture members of Taliban in battle, just as recently, Commander General Khalid Amiri captured dozens of Taliban members in the battle, but Commander Massoud, as expected of him, ordered them to be released on the condition that they don't return to the battlefield. And they were all released. Now, we're following all these rules of war, but this enemy does not respect any law. They don't respect democracy. They don't follow Islam. They don't follow anything. All they do is terrorize. And again, no group is safe from them. Not Tajiks, not Pashtuns. They're killing as many Tajiks up north as they're killing Pashtuns in the south.
So what do you think is the impediment? You know, there hasn't been a huge international push to support the NRF. Why do you think that is, if you guys are working so hard to counter the Taliban, who constantly prove, like you said, you've named all the reasons that we should never trust the Taliban. Why do you think that the NRF faces any pushback, or it doesn't have more people in their corner supporting these efforts?
Well, support where? Internally or external?
Just any kind of, all of it. I mean, just the international community, it seems, has not pushed its support behind the NRF to the extent that I would expect to see, as the only force. That nobody's going to send Western forces back to Afghanistan after the way that we left. I can't see that happening. But here's this force that's on the ground, that's doing the hard work against the Taliban. Why do you think that the international community, that neighboring countries, are not supporting those efforts more vocally, maybe? Well, it's not in the media as much anymore. You know, we're not seeing it. You guys are doing an incredible job of pushing out the story. But in the mainstream media, we just don't see the NRF. And in the UN, I know that Masood has talked to the UN and talked about the need to support the NRF. But after his speech, I never saw any UN movement say to support the NRF.
Well, as you know, you touched on a few different points. In media, in local media inside Afghanistan, they have Taliban officials in their position that forbid these journalists on speaking anything Commander Masood and anything resistance. But we know at the same time there is no member of Taliban in the mainstream media offices in the United States. And so we don't know why the mainstream media does not cover the resistance, but we believe they should, considering the fact that the 800,000 strong veteran community of the Afghan war, and the vast majority of them support the resistance of the Afghan people. We have tremendous support, as is evident from all these videos that we receive in our organization, Vets4NRF, videos of combat veterans supporting Commander Masood and the resistance of the Afghan people. At the same time, we also have a lot of support at the congressional level. We have members like Congressman Mike Waltz and Senator Lindsey Graham, just to name a few, who are very vocal and very public in their support for the NRF and Commander Masood. But if by the international community and the West you meant the President of the United States, well, then I too wonder, just like most of my veteran brothers and sisters, why the leader of the free world fails to mention Afghanistan in any of his speeches, why he failed to mention Afghanistan in the State of the Union addresses, except to say in one of his interviews that our birth country, Afghanistan, is a God-forsaken place. All we can do at this point is to remind the president, his administration, and anyone else willing to listen that the enemy that attacked America on 9/11 is in Afghanistan today. And that enemy is stronger today than it was 2 years ago. That they have a new leader, even though we killed their leader in a drone strike, Ayman al-Zawahiri, in Kabul last year. That leader has been replaced by an Egyptian, and he is in that area near Afghanistan, and he's planning on returning to Afghanistan to enjoy the freedom of movement that the Taliban have provided, the blanket of safety that the Taliban have provided not only for themselves, but to all of these 27 other jihadist groups as well. And I would say, as our good friend Congressman Mike Waltz says, we need to continue reminding the people that the enemy did not get the memo that this war was over. And at this point, finally, I would say that what people need to know is that there is a solution to this problem. And with the organization Vets4NRF, my main objective and our main objective, Jazz and Richards, we're trying to show and tell the American people, and especially the veteran community, that there is a solution to this problem, and the solution is in Afghanistan, and that this disease known as the Taliban, Al-Qaeda, and ISIS, their days are numbered. that the solution is in Afghanistan. The solution is fighting against them, and the name of that solution is the NRF. And it is in our best interest to make sure that the NRF has exactly what it needs to continue this fight against our common enemy and make sure Afghanistan is once again free and women are once again allowed back in society and parliament, at the presidential palace, and in the armed forces of Afghanistan.
Hey, Legend, I'm curious to hear more about Commander Masood. Can you tell us a little bit about his leadership style and why Afghans choose to follow him?
Well, again, Commander Masood, after his father was assassinated in September 9, 2001, he had to leave the country for his own safety. And he studied abroad. He graduated from in United Kingdom, from a university in United Kingdom. He has military training. And again, the Afghan people know that in this past 2 decades of war, Commander Masood had no role in the corruption that was ongoing, the widespread corruption, and he had no official role in the Afghan government. For the most part, he remained in the opposition, and he always spoke out against the corruption. And when the Afghan people saw that their so-called leaders fled, they had no one else to turn to. And they turned to Commander Masood, and he gladly accepted, and he agreed to help his constituency. And again, at that point, he even agreed to meet with the Taliban, who had helped Al-Qaeda assassinate his father. And he even said he was willing to forgive them for killing their father, should they agree to peace. But the Taliban and their allies, they refused peace. And so leaving us no choice but to resist.
It's highly...
Go ahead.
Yeah, what can the average listener do, to support what the NRF is doing, what Masood is doing?
Well, if you're an Afghan here in Europe or in America, I would say you need to stand up and speak up and tell the world that the Taliban is not your culture, that the way they govern is not what you want, that what they portray to be as your religion is not in fact your religion, that you are in fact a patriotic nation, that you're a peace-loving people, you believe in peace and dignity and being self-reliant. And the American people and people in Europe, they need to hear this from you. If you don't, they will think that you apparently want the Taliban, that the Taliban is your culture, and that's what you wanted. So that's what it will take. And if you're an African American, I would say you need to stand up and speak up and start talking about this. If you're a veteran, especially a veteran here in America, I would humbly request you to go to our website, Vets4NRF.org, and read the open letter that we have there. And if you would agree to join us, we would be honored and we would welcome your support. We have members like Lieutenant Colonel Scott Mann, Ben Owen, and many others, Travis Peterson, all supporting us. And we would be honored to have your support as well.
Those are some amazing people to have in your corner, for sure. They get things done.
Yep. Hey, Legend, for people listening that, maybe are not too familiar with what's going on in Afghanistan, can you kind of tell us, what threat the Taliban might pose to the United States at this point and how strong the Taliban really is right now?
Well, this is a group, just to give you a reminder, this is a group that gave safe haven to Osama bin Laden, who attacked the United States on 9/11 and killed 3,000 innocent American citizens. And this is, we defeated this enemy. But now this enemy invaded Afghanistan all over again in August of 2021, and it has once again provided safe haven to Al-Qaeda, to ISIS. And like I said earlier, when these guys attack the Afghan resistance positions, they're collaborating, and we have evidence of this. We have ISIS and Taliban and Al-Qaeda commanders collaborating and attacking NRF positions. And I would like to remind everyone that the objective of these jihadists does not end with Afghanistan. It only begins there. And that these groups will not rest until they carry out another attack like 9/11. And all of these groups, none of these groups want to come in second place. They all want the upcoming attack to be bigger than the last attack. So this enemy has attacked America before. This enemy has attacked freedom before, and it plans to do it all over again.
Oh, that's a very scary thought, and it's something that I've written about several times in the aftermath of this withdrawal, just how real that threat is, and that it's worse than it was in the days preceding 9/11 now, because there are so many more groups and they have become so much more capable. And I think that we've taken our eye off it because we're largely embarrassed by the withdrawal, the way it was conducted. And I think a lot of people are trying to sweep it under the rug. But then we had that hearing at the House Foreign Affairs Committee 2 weeks ago now, at least at the time that we're shooting this. Do you think, did that make you feel, Legend, like there's going to be progress, that there's going to be, I mean, the NRF was brought up during that hearing. Did you feel good about the way that that went, or do you still have concerns about the future?
Absolutely. On my part, I would like to thank Chairman Mikael and Ranking Member Meeks for holding that absolutely necessary hearing. We have to discuss what happened. But I would like to add something, that evacuations were a reaction by the good-hearted Americans and the good-hearted veterans of the Afghan war to a problem. But it was a reaction. And the veterans took care of it. They jumped in. They evacuated their allies, their interpreters, American citizens. But what we have failed to do thus far is speak about why there was a need for an evacuation. And we're saying that the reason this evacuation and all of this happened is the Taliban. That is the problem. Evacuation and discussing the Afghan Adjustment Act, these are all working on symptoms. The actual problem still remains there. And the solution to that problem is the NRF. What we need to do, so my point is, what we need to be doing also on the sidelines is to discuss the activities of the NRF and how to continue this war against terrorism, how to enable the NRF so they could continue fighting this war against terrorism and put a stop to these violent extremist groups in Afghanistan. That is one thing I'm looking forward to, as there will be, from what I hear, there will be more congressional hearings, and I'm really looking forward to them, and I really hope they start discussing the activities of the NRF and a solution for going forward.
Legend, what is the NRF looking for from the U.S. government? I mean, are they looking for money? Are they looking for guns? Are they looking for air support? Like, what would it be that they would want, that you guys would want?
Well, these are questions that will be that can be best answered by Commander Massoud, and many of this and much of this information is listed not only on our website, Vets4NRF, but also the official website of the NRF. And I would say this, Commander Massoud on numerous occasions, including in this recent public podcast he did with Lieutenant Colonel Scott Mann, Congressman Walz, and myself, he said that we would be lying to the world if we said we do not need help. We do need help. Both the spokesperson of the NRF and the head of foreign relations of the NRF have also publicly said that the NRF is fighting against international terrorism, groups that affect the security and stability of the world. But we're doing it all alone without any foreign support, and the world has abandoned us. So yes, the NRF needs support, and again, going back to what I mentioned earlier, coming from a CENTCOM background, I would say the best place to start is a CENTCOM liaison. So at this point could provide non-lethal support and intelligence to the NRF. So there's that. So yes, we do need support as we fight these international terrorism. And again, we're not only fighting for the safety and security of my birth country, Afghanistan, but for the security of the freedom-loving people all over the world, because terrorism affects everyone, not just the Afghan people.
Absolutely. So when is this, from my recollection, the fighting season starts about the same time that the planting season starts. Is that accurate? When do you expect that the fighting will commence again in Afghanistan?
Well, we don't want to put a date. We don't want to announce a date, but in the very near future, you will see, you will hear more from the NRF and from the office of the spokesperson and from the office of the head of foreign relations of the NRF.
Well, I know I don't want to speak for you, Mikael, but I know I'd love to hear some regular updates that we could share with our listeners in the future about how that's going and get the good word out about what you guys are doing.
Yeah, so Jazz, I guess this might be a great time to switch over to you. Can you tell us a little bit about how you got involved in the organization?
Mikael. This is a cause that is personal to me as well as professional. When I saw the withdrawal, that was very heartbreaking for me. It was overwhelming, just because I knew that my own relatives they're still living in Afghanistan, and I didn't know about their whereabouts. And so joining Legend Group and Vets4NRF for me was the right thing to do, to continue my work, not only for what's going on with women's rights, but also to work toward a country that needs to be freed again.
Absolutely. I've been amazed since I've been covering this with just how swift and painful that, especially the women's rights, the regression has been so quick. And I know you went into the country, which still boggles my mind that you returned in August of 2022. What was that like as a woman being in Afghanistan a year after the Taliban took hold?
Well, I saw fear. I saw hunger. I saw hopelessness. You know, Beth, you're absolutely right. But I tell you this: there are things that you don't see about, and things that you don't see on TV. If you go an hour in any direction out of Kabul city, you will immediately begin to see suffering at a level that is unimaginable. You will see insurgents, foreign terrorists, beheading, chopping off hands, amputation. Children are being sold for food. Young girls are forced to marry Taliban, Al-Qaeda, and Taliban commanders. So my experience, I would say, was one that made me very, very sad. I had been following Afghanistan for the past 20 years, and there was finally so much peace. You know, people had rights, girls were free, and we had achieved so much, especially the Afghan women. And now to see that every single right that they have achieved has been taken away from them, it has broken my heart.
I can't even begin to imagine. And so that is that part of the reason that it's so important to you then to be part of Vets4NRF?
Yes, I had my moments that was quite terrifying. In fact, there was one incident that terrified me the most, was the one that the Taliban lashed me for simply taking a photo in Kabul. Thank God Legend was there, because he intervened. He had to beat me in front of them in order to save my life, because the Taliban was ready to beat me. They had raised their weapons, and they would have either shot me or beaten me to death. And so there are those moments that was horrifying, and I still have nightmares about them. And that's why I know how important Vets4NRF and our cause is.
And that was just for taking a picture?
Taking a picture, yes. You're not allowed to walk around with a cell phone taking photos in the street, especially for a woman.
Yeah. And what was it like? Did you have an easy time leaving Afghanistan again, or was it hard? Can you talk about what the Taliban security was like at the airport?
I'll try not to say too much, just because for security purposes, but it was not easy.
Sure.
No. I had to have an escort with me. And yeah.
Was that because of you need a mahram to move around the whole, you can't, as a woman, you cannot go anywhere without your male relative?
Correct. You're really a property of a man, and you cannot go outside walking on the street without a male escort, whoever it is. Could be your brother, it could be your husband, but they need to be related to you in order for you to walk around on the street, or leaving the country for that matter.
Yeah, we had one story from a young woman in one of our earlier episodes who had to come up with all kinds of ways to get out, to go study, to escape the country. And she ended up having to go through Torkham, and I don't believe she ended up going with an escort. But it's these kinds of things that as a Western woman, you can't even imagine being told that you must have a relative who's male with you. But it's even worse. I mean, it seems like every month things get worse for Afghan women, and you almost can't imagine how they could keep getting worse. But there was recently that report that women who had been granted divorces because their husbands were abusing them or abusing drugs, that the Taliban have vacated those divorce rulings now, which is going to force those women either to be stoned publicly for adultery or to return to their abusive husbands. And as you experienced in the streets, I mean, you can publicly abuse your wife in Afghanistan, and it sounds like the Taliban are forcing people to do that. It's so sad to hear. And so you were there for the 1-year anniversary, correct? What was that like?
People are scared. People, they don't accept the Taliban. They don't like the way they govern. They don't support the Taliban. However, they've chosen to remain silent because they feel that they have no voice. They have no supporters, and the world has abandoned them. That was my observation. I feel that if these people were supported, they would fight back, and they would never accept the Taliban. You see, they were never given a chance to fight against the Taliban, like the kind of support that we gave to the Ukrainian people to fight against Russia. The Afghan people do not accept the Taliban. The Taliban is not their culture.
Yeah, it's in the recent report from the Special Inspector General for Afghanistan Reconstruction. They talked about I think the common perception is in the West is that the Afghan National Defense and Security Forces just gave up. And the cigar pointed out the 8 different reasons that is not the case. And all of the things that were not given. I had one Afghan pilot reach out to me and say, we kept fighting until we ran out of ammunition. And then there was no point in flying overhead when we couldn't help the soldiers on the ground who were trying to defeat the Taliban. It's galling that people have been led to believe that Afghans just gave up. They did not just give up.
May I add something here?
Sure.
Let me add something.
Yeah.
As far as the celebrations that you mentioned, I was there in Afghanistan when they were celebrating their 1-year anniversary, and it was horrible. It was embarrassing. It felt really horrible watching it. They were on loudspeakers chanting to America that they're the victorious ones and that the jihad will continue and it will spread. they were burning American flags everywhere, and we were able to rescue some of those American flags with the help of the NRF. But one thing that really made me humble watching it, something really beautiful, was that they were celebrating all alone. They were expecting the Afghan people in Kabul to line up on both sides of the street and clap for them, but that wasn't the case. They were all alone. They were chanting all these nonsense, death to America, all alone. There was no one supporting them.
I'm glad to hear that. And it's what I hear from every Afghan who reaches out to me. None of them want to live under the Taliban. None of them are able to work right now. They're all terrified for their lives. They're all having troubles, economic troubles, social troubles. It's a really devastating thing to hear about every day. And I know I've talked to numerous veterans who are trying to help people still stuck in Afghanistan, and it's a huge weight. And they talked about it at the hearing too. It's a huge weight to have to hear that constant suffering. And I'm glad that you guys are working so hard to try to alleviate that suffering and make sure that the Taliban does not get to stay in power in Afghanistan.
And you know, something Legend just said that striked a chord with me is he was talking about them saving burning American flags in Afghanistan, and it's like, if you don't know who these people are that we're trying to save, like, that's who it is, right? Like, these people have done more for our country than 99% of us Americans have. So, you know, I just wanted to throw that out there.
Yeah.
Yes, we agree. Evacuation of certain individuals is absolutely necessary. That is why veterans saw this. I mean, these veterans, the 800,000 veterans of the Afghan war, they have faced this enemy. They have fought against this enemy. They know how brutal this enemy is. They have 20 years experience dealing with this enemy. That is why they all jumped in, cashed in their saving accounts, and did everything they could to save their allies. But and so yes, we do support the evacuations, and I agree. I mean, I went back there to bring back Americans, to bring back those who needed to be rescued. But again, I would like to remind everyone that evacuation is not going to help Afghanistan. I mean, how many people will we evacuate? There's 14 million people in Afghanistan, and 99% of them did not pick up a weapon to fight against American soldiers. They all wanted democracy. They all wanted freedom. So we cannot, I mean, it will be, we all agree, would all agree, I'm sure you would all agree that we cannot evacuate 40 million people. I mean, even if we did, even if the U.S. military went and brought every single woman, man, and child out, what are we telling the world? I mean, look, right after the withdrawal from Afghanistan, look how emboldened these terrorists became. How emboldened the neighboring countries became, to the point that Putin invaded Ukraine, a sovereign nation. And so what we do have real world consequences. What America, the leader of the free world, does has consequences. And so again, going back to my earlier point, evacuations of certain individuals is absolutely necessary, but evacuations is not going to solve the mass migrations. The terrorists with Afghan passports, foreign terrorists, not born in Afghanistan, but who now are made Afghan citizens with Afghan passports showing up at the U.S. southern border. All of these problems will not be solved by evacuations, and the only way to solve this problem, this bigger problem, the bigger picture, is by supporting the Afghan resistance, the National Resistance Front, that is continuing the war against all of these foreign terrorist organizations.
Sure. Richard, you've been sitting there listening to everything, and I just wanted to ask you, you've got this extensive historical background with research into effective and very ineffective fighting styles. What was it about the NRF that made you keen to support their efforts in Afghanistan with your vast knowledge and research?
Well, you know what? Like Legend said, I was really excited to support them because you got to have a solution. We can't take 14 million people out of Afghanistan, and I don't think 14 million people want to leave their homes. That is, their homeland that they've lived in for tens of thousands of years. I don't think they want to do that. So, I'm not particularly interested in putting a Band-Aid on the problem. I'm interested in curing it. The NRF has a really long and extensive history of being an effective combat force, as well as being a pro-democratic and a pro-American force. And that's two things you got to have. We want to make sure we're supporting guys that do a good job, that are fighting very well, that can fight to win. And we also want to make sure that we're supporting guys that agree with our values, that we care about. And the NRF fits the bill on both of that. And they have a long history going back to not just the current Commander Massoud, but his father, Ahmed Shah Massoud, during his days in the war with the Soviets from 1979 to 1989, as well as the wars against the Taliban throughout the 1990s, and as well as assisting our efforts in the early days of the war on terror in Afghanistan. So that's why I was very excited to see that the NRF is continuing to resist, and they're doing a good job, and they're not on their last legs, but they're actually winning. And with our support, they can ultimately bring peace and freedom back to Afghanistan. That's what I want to see, and I think that's what everybody wants to see, Americans, veterans, and Afghans alike.
Yeah. And Richard, how did you find the organization in the first place?
How'd
you get involved?
Yeah, I found the organization through LinkedIn. I had been following what had been going on since August of 2021, of course, and many people that had been involved in evacuation efforts that were on the ground that were reporting on what was going on. And around December 2021, I started seeing Jazz Cannon's fantastic videos, and I really liked, I liked what she was saying. And it was very different than a lot of these other groups I had seen. So many other groups focus on the humanitarian aspect of things, which is, of course, important. It's important to, evacuate people that need to get out. But like I said, what I was, the Legend Group and then Vets4NRF, what I had seen was that, hey, these guys actually have a real solution to the problem, and that really set them apart in my eyes. And so I started contacting them, and I left lots and lots and lots of historical comments in the comment sections of Jazz Cannon's posts, and so ultimately that's what led us to speak. And so that was how I got involved with Legend Group and Vets4NRF.
I just need to jump in.
So, what? Oh, yeah.
Sorry, Beth. I just need to jump in real quick. I can see that.
No, you go.
Really enjoying his conversation right now. But as his assistant, I need to remind him that he has another Zoom meeting you need to join. So, Legend, I think you need to head out now.
Well, thank you for the reminder. Actually, I do have to go. But before I go, I do want to thank both of you, Michael and Beth, for your efforts in Afghanistan with the Afghanistan Project. Please know that it has not gone unnoticed. Your efforts are appreciated. And on behalf of the freedom-loving people of Afghanistan, I would like to thank both of you for supporting the Afghan people. Please know that what you're doing and what the Afghan resistance and Commander Massoud is doing is no different. We're all helping save Afghan lives and enabling the Afghan people to become masters of their own destiny. So again, from the bottom of my heart and on behalf of the Afghan people, I thank both of you. Thank you very much. God bless. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for being on here, Legend. I appreciate so much getting to finally meet you this way, too. It's been fantastic.
Thank you.
Good night. Well, I think closing up, I'd like to ask both of you, what we're hearing so often from Afghans about their hopelessness, because we've been asking any Afghan who wants to contribute a story to talk to us. And that's the key thing, is just this feeling of hopelessness. And what would you say to Afghans who are listening about how to maintain positivity during these trying times, and what the NRF is working to do for them? If you had like a final closing note to the people of Afghanistan.
Yeah. What I would tell my fellow Afghans is united is what will get us out of these dark days. If we're not united and we do not resist against the Taliban, no one will help us. America will not help us. Europe will not help us. We have to help ourselves before they help us. We need to unite, stand up and speak up and tell the world that the Taliban is not our culture, The Taliban is not our way of life. Taliban do not represent us. They're a small minority group that rules with terror. And this minority group is a problem not only for Afghans, but for the international community. For every peace-loving man, woman, and child anywhere in the world. The reality today is the Afghan people have been left to fight an international problem by ourselves on our own. The only way we will be able to succeed in this is we, the Afghan people, are united and take a stand against the enemy. And we're able to do this by ourselves. The solution to this problem, like Legend mentioned, is inside Afghanistan, and the name of the solution is the National Resistance Front. So this is the case where I would say, ask not what the NRF can do for you, ask what you can do for the NRF.
Absolutely. Well, Richard, do you have any closing thoughts about? Yeah.
To anybody who's listening, particularly the people of Afghanistan, we want to let you know that you're not forgotten. There are some Americans that have let you down and have abandoned you, but we have not. There's a lot of American men and women out here that are working very hard and to make sure that you guys get the help that you need so that your homeland can have peace and freedom again. It's not over. It's not hopeless. It may feel that way right now, but it's not. And we are going to get through this, and ultimately, we are going to win. And that's the message I'd like to leave.
That's fantastic. Well, at the Afghanistan Project Podcast, we always give voice to the people of Afghanistan at the very end about the ordeals that they've undergone during almost 2 decades of war and then under this very tumultuous period of Taliban rule. So today's story is from an Afghan man whom we're calling Shakur. Shakur was an employee at the Kabul International Airport prior to the U.S. withdrawal, but he's now unemployed and very distressed by the Taliban's strict rules. This is his story in his own words. I want to share a painful story from forgotten people in Afghanistan who are living under hunger, poverty, and with no freedom. My name is Shakur. I am 24 years old, living in Kabul province of Afghanistan. I am a Shia follower and a Dari speaker. Being Shia and a Dari speaker in Afghanistan is very difficult. When I go anywhere, they look at me like an animal. It is because of social media and the force of other countries and the United Nations who the Taliban observe that they do not kill all of us. But everyone knows that they still kill and genocide us. They don't give us a job or support or freedom. We live in a cage, but no one understands how we are living. The government isn't supporting us. Other countries and the UN don't care how we live. Even when Taliban and ISIS kill many of us with heavy bombings and attacks, no one cares, and we can't see any progress. I was an employee as a deputy in the Kabul International Airport, since the Taliban government came to power, I am jobless, and I tried to find another job, even in international organizations, because I was qualified. But even those would not shortlist me for an interview. It seems the Taliban has an effect on all Afghanistan, even those organizations that are fighting against or fighting for human rights. When I want to go anywhere, they check my national ID and they show bad behavior, and I feel it's their country and I am a foreigner. Why am I here? Why is my nationality Afghan? Where can I escape? Where can I be safe and have at least a job to support my family? My sisters are not allowed to study and be free to go out. What makes me frustrated and disappointed to even breathe is that I see social media showing the wrong reports. They support the Taliban government as but their news is all wrong and the opposite of what is going on here. We need support, care, jobs, freedom, but who cares and who listens to our muted voices? I can't wear what I want, and I can't cut my hair as I want. Why? Because they will hit me. What kind of humanity is this? Just to breathe, stay silent, stay at home, do nothing, and die silently. I have a request from people who hear my story. If there is a way that you can help me get out of here, please show me the way and help me. Hope to see humanity all over the world and have a free world without terrorism. Best regards, Shakur. As always, we are so grateful to Shakur for sharing that with our listeners. And for any other Afghans who want to share their stories on the podcast, you can send us a detailed letter about your situation and whether you need a pseudonym to protect your identity. Our show address is the Afghanistan Project Podcast at gmail.com, and we'll have that in the show notes along with links to Vets4NRF, the Legend Group Foundation, and everyone who is here tonight so that you can follow them and see what's going on and keep up to date with what the NRF is doing. Richard and Jazz, thank you so much for being here to talk to us about Legend Group Foundation and the Vets4NRF. I'm hoping that your work really can bring peace to Afghanistan.
We're hoping the same. Thank you so very much for having us.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
We were so glad to have you. Thanks again. We want to thank all our listeners, as always, for sharing your time and supporting the people of Afghanistan. Tasha Kaur, and we hope to see you again soon.